Welcome to Good Morning Hospitality, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the industry. From hotels and short-term rentals to all things travel and hospitality, you'll find each episode equips you with the information you need to start your week. Join us on Good Morning Hospitality every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Good morning, Sarah. How are you?
Good morning, Leo. I'm great. How about you?
Not too bad, my friend. All the better for seeing you.
Awesome. Well, all the better for seeing our guest as well. We have a new joiner today, Simon Lehman from AJL Consulting, and also former CEO of Interhome. So we are really going to dive in because we have all kinds of questions about the news that is coming out. This is a really exciting merger. So we'll dive into that in a little bit. But Simon, thank you so much for joining us. I know we called you super last minute as soon as the news came out.
It's great to be here, Sarah and Leo, as always. And let's dive into it.
Amazing. And you two, come on, you two interviewing together. When was the last time this happened?
That was Annecy. We did a fireside chat at the RWS in Annecy. And yeah, I always, I absolutely love interviewing Simon. So I'm super stoked about today because Simon is like us and he has great opinions and he tells the truth. And so it should be a really fun episode for everybody to listen to. So yeah, it's nice to be back sharing the mic with you, Simon.
Same here, Sarah. We always had a lot of fun and it's been a long time, that's for sure. But hey, it doesn't matter. Also, my time at Interhome is more than 10 years ago. So a lot of differences, more children and more gray hair, but all good.
Love it, Simon. Look, I'm just happy that you've agreed to come back because last time you came and did that really cool episode on the show with me, you ended up in hospital for a week afterwards, didn't you, buddy? So thanks for braving us again. We really appreciate it.
It doesn't look like it's going to happen tomorrow, so that's good.
Also, as well, we haven't talked about this yet, but Simon, I hope we'll be seeing you in London. I hope the three of us will get to do a proper hangout at the Short Stay Summit. That's coming up fast.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a given in my calendar. Looking forward to hosting again an investor panel with some very interesting people. I mean, we're talking about Interhome, but we have Steve Schwab from HomeToGo there. They're making some press in the US as well. I've got Graham Donahue as well on stage. And then we have also Raviv Schwartz from Guesty. And then two very, very large private equity firms. So it's going to be a great panel. And then I'm also going to do a breakout session, CEO roundtable about M&A.
Amazing. Good. Well, look, let's get into it. We've got a lot to discuss today. The audience don't need to hear about the fact that I failed to go to the gym. So let's not, Sarah, just leave me alone. I don't want to talk about it. And look, I've also got to mention it. This is the few days where love is at the center of everything because we're around Valentine's Day, of course. So happy Valentine's Day to you both. I can't believe I'm getting to share it with you both instead of with Jasmine. So there you go. All righty, let's do it. Sarah, you've got the hospitality highlight for us. Let's get going.
I do. So mine was an article in FocusWire, which is about buy now, pay later. And for me, this is a really interesting trend. It's something that I personally have taken advantage of. I know on many OTAs when it's like reserve now, pay later, or even potentially splitting up the cost of maybe a more expensive trip into some different broken out payments has been really great. It's something that I certainly appreciate. It's not something I do with interest because I am very frugal and always leery of something like that. But it definitely could be a really interesting trend to follow for our industry, especially because OTAs and or booking platforms that are offering this buy now, pay later tend to have much higher conversion rates. And it's something that is much more adopted among Gen Z and millennials. So it's something that we're going to continue to see grow. But it caught my eye. I thought it was really interesting. And I think there's a lot we can do in our industry to harness it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really interesting trend. Well, first of all, I wonder, is it a trend or is it the fact that we've had quite slow economic growth for the last 12 months? And as that starts to improve, potentially we'll see the need for it to diminish. Not sure. I'll take an angle on this and then interested to hear from Simon, which is actionable insight for property managers. If you have a significant enough size of inventory that you're starting to get fairly decent amount of traction on your direct booking website. Now, that's not actually a given. You can have traction on your direct booking website if it's got 3 or 4 listings on it, but really we're talking when you get into the 20s, 30s plus, hundreds sort of area, you can start to really get a significant amount of direct bookings. This is actually a really good way of sort of reducing the peakiness of your revenue, right? If you can get people to split payment over a 12-month period, and try offering interest-free or very, very low interest versions of that, it's smart, right? It just means that you've got less revenue purely coming in at the point of booking or at the point of arrival. So I think it's quite a good way to control cash flow. And yeah, as I say, we're seeing the Eurozone, the UK. We are looking to have more growth this year than last year, but it's not saying we're going to knock it out the park. Therefore, it's probably the right thing to try and do if you are going to catch younger people that you want to come and stay. However, like you, I'm not a buy now, pay later person. And where it's with interest, I would really look quite pessimistically at it, because clearly you don't want people spending more than they can afford. But I do think there's a place for it. So yeah, I'm glad you raised it. Simon?
Yeah, good point. I mean, first of all, as consumers in today's world, I mean, you can buy furniture, television equipment, anything like that already for a long time, right? So you can lease your car, you can drive it around forever and pay your lease payments, and you can buy a television and pay later as well. I mean, in terms of a consumer point of view, that product's been around for a long time, right? I'm not too sure. And obviously, we need to be very creative in driving bookings and interest and everything else. Me as a consumer, I'm in the same group as you both. I couldn't sleep in my holiday if I still have to pay it off. So that's not really something that I would do, to be perfectly honest. But hey, I mean, if it creates opportunities to create more bookings and having a more staggered out cash flow, I can see that. Obviously, you need to mitigate your risk that you end up with the cash in your bank eventually. So, I mean, we've seen a lot of creative products, and I'm not sure if that's going to take massive traction, but there's for sure people who want to do it that way.
Well, look, Sarah, thanks for sharing the love on that one of the hospitality highlight. Now let's get into the big story. Finally, it's happened. Sarah and I, Simon, have been speaking about this one for months. Every time we get a bit more news. So finally, HomeToGo has signed a binding agreement to acquire Interhome for €160 million. Interhome, as we know, are a Swiss-based property management company. I've seen in the articles it's saying they're the second largest property management company in Europe. Simon, you know a lot about the deal. Sarah and I think, can ask you some questions if that's okay. Tell me, to begin with, what do you see is HomeToGo's main motivation for acquiring Interhome?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a massive topic, and I'm glad to be here and give some background. You're anticipating that we know a lot. That's not the case. I mean, having been a CEO more than 10 years ago doesn't mean I know a lot. But obviously, I followed the development of Interhome and everything else, and then the transaction. I would like to take that question quickly a level up. It's quite interesting how this entire process of Migros is the owner company of HotelPlan. HotelPlan is a travel company with 5 different companies. There's business travel, there's tour operating, there's retail, there's a ski operator part of it, and also Interhome. So it's a quite diverse portfolio of travel companies, and Migros finally decided to sell that asset. Migros is one of the largest food retailers in Switzerland. It's an institution. It's a co-op, interesting enough, which also needs to be known. And HotelPlan, used to be one of the largest tour operators in the world. So there's a big history behind it. In 1990, they've acquired Interhome from the former founder at the time. And it was an interesting asset, and they definitely did very well with Interhome over time. But one thing that was clear when it was announced early last year that Migros is divesting their travel arm, one thing that Migros made very clear is that they want to sell this as a whole, which means they want to sell the entire travel business, including the tour operating, the retail, and the Interhome business as one. And I think that has been proven to be very challenging, because tour operating in Switzerland is a challenging market. There's retail shops. You need a lot of cash to buy travel arrangements in advance before you sell that. So the interest on the travel business wasn't as high as it was on Interhome. So we can assume that if they would have decided from the start to say, okay, we look at potentially split sales, it could have gone into different directions. The biggest challenge was for anybody to wrap their heads around, especially the private equity world. Hey, we want Interhome, but we maybe not as interested in the travel business, right? For all the right reasons. And I think that's where ultimately, and because when we knew the split is not going to happen right away, then it sort of put other contenders like an Aways, like an Oyo with Belvilla, other strategic buyers who were interested in the asset and also private equity out of the race, because you had to take this whole thing. And I think the way it's come out now, where Dare Touristic, which is a subsidiary of Rewe, which is one of the largest food retailers in Germany, is taking over the travel business. They've also acquired Kuoni a few years back. And HomeToGo was capable or able to find a partner to say, hey, I'm going to take Interhome and you're going to take the travel business. And that actually made the deal possible. We know for a fact that there were obviously several other private equities involved. There was a lot of interest in this asset, but in the first round of bids, all the private equities left because they were interested in the Interhome business and not in the travel business. So that's why it's taken so long, because they had to find the right deal. And I think it's definitely a very interesting move. And one thing I would like to add, we've seen some other press releases at the end of the year where Casago is bidding for a takeover of Acasa, but that's not down yet because another investor has increased the share price. So this is good. It gives confidence again into our space in terms of vacation rental and everything else. And Interhome is definitely an incredible asset with massive potential within a HomeToGo environment. At the beginning, when we heard that there were discussions happening, I felt, that's a stretch. I had Bodo Thielmann, who is the head of corporate biz dev at HomeToGo, on my panel in London last year at the Short Stay Summit. And I asked him the question, hey, could you also consider buying property management companies? And he says, we'll look at everything. So that was already the opening door of that conversation, because if you look at HomeToGo, where they originally came from the meta search and then went more into distribution than technology, they even bought PMSs like Secra, they have Smoothblue, so they had a lot of different brands. And now adding, in a way, a hardcore end-to-end PMC is definitely a very bold move, and it's going to be very interesting to see how is that going to be integrated.
Super interesting. I think kind of in that same vein, Simon, I'm curious. I mean, Interhome is more of a sort of traditional property management business, whereas HomeToGo is much more of like tech-enabled provider. And so how do you see those two merging together and or potentially clashing post-acquisition?
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be interesting to be seen how that is going to evolve. But if you need to look how HomeToGo has now transitioned over time as well with HomeToGo Pro, which is definitely something where they want to be. That's now 55% of their business, right? So, I mean, there's several reasons. I mean, HomeToGo, we need to remember, is a public listed company. So therefore, they need to create value for their shareholders. They need cash flow, they need profitability, and they definitely have. So I think the strategy of acquiring Interhome is several-fold. It's acquiring profitability on one side, it's acquiring cash flow. And from an outside standpoint, you could think, how is another PMC going to look at this transaction where they now own a potential competitor of theirs, like in a way who is using HomeToGo? Why should they now continue to work with that? Sometimes we think too deep in that, because at the end of the day, we're being very opportunistic. I remember the days post COVID when everybody said, I'm never going to use Airbnb again. Okay, that has become a running gag at the time, because everybody went straight back, even though Airbnb at the time decided to pay guests instead of owners back. And that didn't go down well. So, I think it's hard to anticipate. I think the opportunity is massive. The opportunity is massive depending on how this is going to happen. And I don't have an answer for that directly for you, Sarah. How is that going to work? But I mean, when you see HomeToGo, they run their businesses pretty independently for quite a lot of time. And this is the first large PMC. And, one thing we should also remember from Interhome's standpoint, and you alluded to that earlier, that Interhome is a sort of more traditional property management company.
Yeah.
We, in our terms at AGL, when we talk about the different type of models in the PMC space, we call that a hybrid model, okay? So that means they're 30,000 plus unit, doesn't mean they're all end-to-end managed with cleaning, with maintenance, with key holding and everything. It's only about a third of their inventory is fully managed. And then they have exclusive inventory from other agencies they already redistribute now, right? So I think we need to be careful. We've seen it on my LinkedIn post. We had some people comparing Ways with Interhome or Bacasa or others. These are substantially different models. Even a Forge Sykes Cottages, that's a distribution exclusive business, but they don't do property management. So we need to be careful when we compare these different models and then extrapolate what kind of value is that going to create for HomeToGo. I mean, it's needless to say that they, are they going to give them preference in listing results, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's all needs to be seen, but I would envisage to think that to start off with, they will run this business pretty separate and work their way around it.
Yeah, you touched on something really interesting too, Simon, about the guest experience, right? Which is something that Leo and I are banging on about all the time. Hyperlocal, 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 and it's something that Interhome has really mastered. Whereas I think there definitely is a factor of risk when you have a more tech-enabled provider that maybe hasn't been as traditionally focused on the guest, and so. I'm curious how you see potential changes in the overall guest experience, if any, kind of post-merger as well.
Yeah, that's a great question, Sarah. And I think that needs to be managed over time and see. I mean, Interhome has a clear differentiation factor, which I think is in one side a USP, having these local service offices in literally all the destinations, to your point, being hyperlocal. So if you look at the coast of France and Spain and the Alps, they have offices literally in every resort themselves, brick and mortar. So if they have 100 units, a certain density, they have their own local service office, which gives them the local touch, the relationships to the guests and also to the owners and everything else. And that obviously comes with a cost, right? And can that cost be managed or not? And how is the value created for the guest? And can you do that in a different way? That needs to be definitely seen. It doesn't mean they will definitely look at cost. There's no question. I mean, they're a public company. They look at profitability and everything else. And do these offices, are they going to be needed in the future or not? How do they deal with that? Other large companies deal without their offices. They deal with partners and destinations. But it doesn't mean that the guest experience will have to ultimately suffer from that. But it's definitely USP that there has leverage as well.
I think it's interesting. I think your sense is probably right that they will run it as quite a separate business, at least initially, because there could be a bit of a culture clash if not, right? And it's part of a more traditional boots on the ground business, which again is fantastic, and I think is how you do property management well. But with that in mind, what do you think it means for the wider European industry? Are we going to see Holiday or other competitors of theirs making plays? And we know Holiday have made plays before as well, but how do you see it reshaping the market? And do you think this means more consolidation is coming?
Yeah, look, how long have we beaten the drum for consolidation? For many, 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 many years, right? And now we're seeing different business models. We see franchise models, et cetera, et cetera. Number one, I would like to go back quickly on a term you've used. This is not a merger. It is a takeover, substantially different. Okay, so they are acquiring that business. This is not merging. So it's not like merger of equals and then we'll see what comes out. So this is a takeover, number one. Number two, obviously Sarah knows a lot better, but we've done sort of back of an envelope calculation that the largest 4 property managers in Europe, call it the way, Sykes, Wellwiller, and Interchalet and Interhome, make up less than 2% of the supply. So here's the question. This is the reply to your consolidation question. It's not happening. I mean, we should remember Interhome was founded in 1965, right? And they've grown over time, but they've not grown massively above that. They made big acquisitions with Interchalet in the past, but at the end of the day, this is not skyrocketing because growing supply is a challenge with all that the challenges you have with the operation, the execution, and everything else. So yeah, at the end of the day, consolidation is, and that's something I said publicly in many speeches last year and even this year, consolidation is something that is not going to happen. Vacation rental is a hyper-local business. number one. Number two, vacation rental is the only asset we have is trust with homeowners. Scaling trust is a challenge. And I always call it, as an analogy, I call it welcome to the mushroom business. You cut one off and five others are coming up. So, as long as the core of the supply is individually owned and not institutionally owned, that supply is not going to consolidate.
I think that's very interesting. And I agree on the supply point. If you look at the data, again, from AirDNA, usually it shows that the biggest host segment is the 1 to 5 listing segment, right? And I feel that software companies are now pitching their tent firmly towards that group, which they weren't doing years ago. As a consequence, it becomes easier and easier to manage your own listing, and so therefore you're less tempted to give it to a property manager. So I think that fracturing of the supply will continue. What about on the vendor side, though, Simon? As because I agree on the sort of host side, but what about on the software and the vendor side? Do you see more happening this year? PMS is
without a doubt. Without a doubt. And before I go there, I'll just quickly come back to the long tail as well. One thing that is interesting to see, and again, we have data provides that, but if we look at total supply, even on a global basis, it's interesting that the difference between long tail and fully managed inventory has not really shifted in any direction, right? So it's about half. Half is doing it themselves, and the other half is choosing to have a property management company. The question is, where do you draw the line of who being a property management company? 20 units plus, I would call that already a property manager. It's interesting that these new technologies, also Smoobu, which is part of HomeToGo, or Bookkeep Live from Holido, and HostAway and other are really going after that long tail and create more stickiness and everything else. So I don't think, we talk about professionalization, we want to move up the needle. I think that split between individually managed inventory and property management managed inventory, I think that split is always going to remain about the same. And hopefully the professionals can increase that with more regulations and higher guest expectations, etc. In terms of technology, that's definitely happening. So there, I would use the word consolidation. There's no doubt. I mean, we've seen some massive capitalizations just recently with HostAway, 375 million. We've seen Guesty with, a lot of cash and have acquired a lot of businesses. It's getting more and more tougher for software companies to really make a difference out there, where larger ones are massively capitalized. And we all remember the AGL technology landscape that we have created and we're updating on an ongoing basis. I mean, that has 22 subverticals of softwares that are provided to property management companies. I think that slide, and it's somewhere behind me, right? Yeah, there it is. Mm-hmm. That's definitely gonna have a few white spots in the next 12 to 24 months, without a doubt, because small verticals who just offer one subvertical of tech, they can't survive, because spending marketing expenses, going to conferences, and you're just solving one little piece of the entire value proposition. And I don't want to attack anybody publicly, which ones I'm thinking of, but there's plenty of subverticals that struggle to raise capital. Why do you want, as a PMC, use 10 different software providers to run your business? You want to use one or two. You want revenue, you want operation, you want a PMS, and you want data. Full stop.
Yeah, super interesting. I have sort of the $1 million question, Simon, which is, like, if you were still running Interhome, how would you
have a gun?
How would you approach the transition and the acquisition? I'm super curious and would love to hear how you would go about it.
I think it's for the entire team and everybody else, it's a massive opportunity. Become a part of something larger that is entirely focused on this industry. I mean, being part of Hotelplan, they're focusing on travel, tour operating, travel retail, many different pieces, right? So, but now they're transitioning into a business where STR, vacation rental, is their DNA. So I think that provides massive opportunities. One thing for my former colleagues, it was very unfortunate, I think, that this has taken so long, because if you know that you're for sale, that's brutal, right? So that puts you in a hibernation mode, because you can't act and push and make acquisitions and make big strategic changes. So these 12 months have definitely been painful. And now it's there's a huge relief coming to the team and everything else. Everybody knows this is what's going to happen. And this is a massive opportunity. So I think that's where I would use that opportunity if I would be at the helm in that transition, to really use that as a power behind me with the team to say, hey, this is now a massive opportunity and we need to be very open in how we can leverage that and create maximum results for it.
Simon, so interesting. We could keep going. We could definitely keep deep diving this, but we're going to have you back to talk about it. We're going to have to move on. Let's move on quickly. We can't not do this final article, guys. So this one really caught my eye. An article in short-term rentals. And essentially, Airbnb seemed to have found the answer for online scams, guys. It's make sure you always book with Airbnb. Who knew? Who knew, right? Okay, so OTA, Airbnb, warned about online scams. Airbnb has warned that young people are particularly at risk of online fraud in a message to customers booking holidays through its website. New research by Airbnb in partnership with GetSafe Online found that 40% of people under 30 search for or book holidays through social media platforms. Very interesting. That's Gen Z again. I don't think any of us have booked through social media platforms, but let's see. There's always this summer, guys. There's always this summer. But what do we think? I'll give you my thoughts quickly. I think that for me, this feels like Airbnb are maybe suggesting that they're the answer when really it's about looking at your own house as well and saying, look, everyone's got a problem with fraudulent listings. As an industry, we need to be signposting things better, encouraging consumers to take a hard look at every listing that they're looking at. You make sure they're using a credit card, all of that sort of stuff to try and be sensible consumers. And then also there's a slight thing that barbs me, which is some of these tactics of using social media are a really good way for smaller operators to try and generate direct bookings. So there's that whole thing in play as well. Look, I'm not going to go too much off the deep end on this, but it's obvious from my point of view. I think that the direct booking movement in general does really well by leveraging social media, and I think it's just about doing it safely. Sarah?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I'm the classic cynic, so I read this and I was like, well, of course Airbnb is going to say that. They try and make it sound like it's an official study. I mean, of course they're at risk of losing market share, especially with Gen Z, who is thinking outside the box, and they are looking for alternates to some of the kind of big OTAs, and they're looking for something a lot of times that's maybe even more authentic. This goes back to a lot of the other travel trends that we've been talking about of late, which is people want something different. They want something unique. They want it off the beaten path. Fine. I'm, for example, this weekend, I'm not even a Gen Z, but I'm going, out of town for the weekend. And instead of going like to Bordeaux to do wine tasting, I'm going to a little, region outside of Barcelona that's maybe like a 2-hour drive, and it's going to be great. And it's less known. And when we, rang up the bodega to make a reservation, it was all hyper local, and they were super lovely, and they do really small tastings, and they're going to organize a private tasting for us. It's so much nicer. And we actually found that on Instagram. So
there you go.
So again, it does work. So I would assume with accommodation, it would be the same. I think especially when you're looking for that kind of inventory that really is unique, that's outside of just, an apartment in a city or something. When you get more off the beaten path, I think it's really interesting. Simon?
Yeah, I have to comment on that, and I definitely agree with both of you where you're coming from. It's sort of a bit cynical, this whole thing, but I think one other thought I want to throw into the ring is why is that as well? And this is not just because Gen Z is looking for different ways and off the beaten track and blah blah blah, which I totally agree, but this is also fueled by regulations. Because we can use New York as an example. What happened in New York? They banned Airbnb. Airbnb lost all the listings, and you could book all the places on Facebook. And it went to social. So this is also a way in how smaller owners want to circumvent regulatory issues, because the property can't be found as easy as it is on an Airbnb listing, where you can just go to AirDNA and get all your data, and they're exported anyway. If you have it on social, it's far harder to track from a regulatory environment. And this is why a lot of people, I believe, especially in tougher regulated destinations, are using social media to rent instead, because it's less obvious. And that has fueled this trend as well. There's no question about it.
That's super interesting, Simon. I honestly had never even thought about that. But you're absolutely right. I didn't think about the implications in cities, but
I mean, New York was the proof of it. I mean, first of all, everything went into the neighboring states, New Jersey and whatever, number one, from Airbnb's point of view. But now if you go to New York, then you just book one on Facebook.
Being an Airbnb host in New Jersey, I mean, what a time to be alive, right? What a time to be alive. Views of Manhattan. and then a black, just completely dark around Manhattan Island. Fantastic. I can't believe we run out of time because, Simon, we want to get more from you, but you'll come back, I assume, won't you? Because you're always willing to come and talk to Sarah and I, right?
Of course. More Sarah than you, but I'll definitely come back.
100%.
Oh, come on, Simon. He cut his hair for you and everything today. We've got a brand new haircut. He cleaned up for you.
He's looking sharp. That's for sure.
Well,
but it's always good to be surprised, and congratulations on what you're producing. Really like the show and your enthusiasm and everything else. And, if I can give my 2 bobs worth of input, then obviously I'm more than happy to do that. And the check comes later.
Well, look, Simon, thank you. We appreciate it. And we will be seeing you in person. The next time will be in London in April. So hopefully we can grab you for a quick interview because Sarah and I will be there doing some recording. Sarah, have a great weekend at your hyper-local kind of experience. We can't wait to hear all about that. Sounds lovely. Isn't it too warm for Mauro, though? Doesn't he need to be like sort of going to Iceland or something to have fun?
No, he's not going. I'm going with my girlfriend. So it's going to be amazing. It's a girls' trip. So no boys allowed.
Even better. Even better.
Even better.
Don't give the address to Leo, okay?
And to you at home, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please hit like, share, subscribe in all the usual social places, or go to Apple or Spotify podcasts and give us a 5-star review or a comment. Until next week, many thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.